Ladies and gentlemen, one thing that's happening all over America, there are a lot of office space that's unoccupied, office space that probably would have been leased out 20 or even 10 years ago, but it's now just sitting empty. And because of all the inflation that's going on, it's not easy for them to fill these vacant buildings and office storefronts. So things have changed. And I think the most dramatic changes happened during the pandemic when you had a lot of people that made sure they were never going to return back to the office. You had a lot of retirements happen. You had a lot of people switching jobs, starting new businesses. So I can understand how this happened. Now, I've done stories on New York, how this is really a problem there as well. But one thing about a place like Texas, it's really booming. There's a lot of people on these coastal states where the cost of living is high, and they are now shifting over to Texas. So, as far as the state pulling in more of a population, they're actually thriving right now. And they're luring a lot of these companies that used to be on the East Coast and West Coast, and they are setting up shop in Texas. So, Houston, Dallas, and Austin top the list of US major cities with the highest office vacancy rates. You know what I think they did when the economy was a little more stable? I mean, it's never really been stable under these folks. They just have never been good. That's why every so many years there's a recession because they're just not good at leading the country, despite the fact that they really believe they are. And I think they oversaturated the cities with office buildings. It really shouldn't be as many as we see in these cities around the country. I can see some, but in the sake of making money, they just went overboard. And now you can go through any city and you will just see so many vacancies that you probably would never have seen even 20 years ago or even a decade ago. And I noticed that even in the cities that I'm close to. So, according to Moody's Analytics, about 25% of the office space in Texas wasn't leased as the third quarter of the year came. They're not leasing these places. And it's more than double in New York. The vacancy is at 12%, and well above San Francisco. Vacancy rate 17%. So Texas is at 25%. That's pretty high. Texas office floors are struggling to find tenants, though the state's workers have been more than eager to get back to the office than most other places, according to Castle System, which measures occupancy and counting key card swipes in 10 major metro areas. Houston, Austin, and Dallas have the highest office return rate. Yeah, because they probably, like many cities, they just have too many offices. And there's no need to have that many. Vacancies are largely due in Texas developers building too much. That's why I'm saying they went overboard. And that happened in virtually every city in this country. You can just literally pull open a map, point at the city, go there, and that's going to be one of the things you will notice. All of the space, office space that's available. It is just off the charts. They went way, way overboard in putting all this office space up. And now they can't find any tenants, no one that will lease the space. And that's becoming a much tougher market out here. Vacancies are high largely because Texas developers built too much. All three cities experienced a surge in construction in the 1980s when tax rules favored developers and loose lending created a commercial real estate bubble. Another construction spurt in the late 90s, and that is now a problem. Now, Texas high vacancy rate offers more evidence that the US office market biggest problem hasn't been primarily remote work. It's the gutting of buildings across the US, which have been decades in the making, and helps explain why the country has long had a much higher vacancy rate than Europe or Asia. Office markets in other booming Sunbelt cities, such as Atlanta, are also suffering despite economic growth and job creation. They have too many buildings, y'all. That's what it is. They have too many. In the name of greed, this is what these folks have done. But the Lone Star State is an extreme case. Cheap land and lax regulation encourages developers to overbuild during booming times. Construction in Texas has slowed from the 1980s, but new office completions as a share of the market still outpace the rest of the country. Each year for the last 16 years, the leasing at real estate brokerage, they're saying that the older buildings in places like Texas are losing tenants. And it looks like they don't have a remedy for that at all. So people want to be in a more newer, modern building, and the older, aging office buildings are just sitting there. Mm-mm-mm. Most of the aging office buildings are in the suburbs around the three big cities. They are increasingly out of favor with a new generation of desk workers who tend to prefer modern buildings and walkable urban neighborhoods. Take Granite 190, a suburban office complex outside of Dallas, surrounded by fields and sprawling parking lots that was completed in 2001. This summer, the property's biggest tenant, U.S. Healthcare Services, which gave up most of its space. As of August, the complex is nearly 70% vacant, according to data. The owner defaulted on the loan, yeah, because they don't have the tenants. They don't have any tenants, hardly. The company handling the mortgage on the behalf of bondholders recently said it expects to foreclose. Remote work is also hurting Texas landlords, but the impact has been more gradual because most companies sign long term leases. They have to continue paying rent even if they don't actually use the space anymore. As more leases expire, remote work might push vacancies higher. The supply gut, meanwhile, is already hitting the state's office market with full force. Austin saw a lot of new office construction over the past 7 years as developers rushed to cash in on the city's emergence as a corporate hub. all of those new towers are now competing with older buildings built in the 80s and 90s. But you know what? When I was out working in corporate America, there were two companies I worked for that did physical moves. And it was always to a more modern, newer building, or they had a building constructed just for the company. And then we all moved. And, I have not experienced being in a new building and then stepping back to an old building. It's always a more newer, modern building. So, Houston's vacancy rate has also surged in recent years, but for different reasons. The city's economy depends on the energy sector. Crash in oil prices in 2014 caused demand for office space to crater, help push up vacancies, and that oil crash caused a 14.9% vacancy, and it went from 14.9%, and in 2019 it went to 23.5%. Since then it has increased to 26.4%, the highest among 79 markets, behind only much smaller Charleston and Dayton, according to Moody. At Houston, 4.5 million square mile foot Greenway Plaza office complex, an appraiser recently cut the estimate value to more than $425 million, down from $1 billion in 2017. The complex was 34% vacant as of September, up from 12% in March of 2022. Wow. Mm-mm-mm. So, y'all, I mean, it's just like most places that you see around the country, maybe a little more vacancies than some places, but it's bad. This is a problem that's going to get worse because the population in America is getting smaller. So, this problem with all of these business vacancies everywhere, it's going to be so bad. You probably will walk down the street and be able to count several empty buildings and office space, all in a very short radius. But y'all, please tell me what you think about this video. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.